The following is a fan-based discussion. All properties discussed are property of Toei Inc., Bandai, Hasbro, and Subaraya Productions.
Hello, everybody. Today, in order to sort of provide a conclusion to the last Tokutalk that we did on this particular subject, we're talking about villain generals, but this time in Rider. Now, Rider does this really differently, depending on which era you're looking at. If you go back to the Showa, it and Sentai shared a lot of similarities in the way that they did their villain groups, where it was big bad, couple of generals under, whole bunch of random monsters, foot soldiers. And that's pretty much how it went.
Because the only one that really comes to mind, I think, is Black RX. Did that have that dynamic, or am I imagining things?
It did, yeah.
Okay, good.
Because they had the guy with the golden mask.
Yeah.
And, you know,
who I mainly remember from the few episodes I saw of Masked Rider and not Kamen Rider Black RX.
It's accurate, though.
At least I didn't hallucinate it.
Yep, that's exactly where I remember them from, too. But yeah, Showa didn't really differentiate really across the board, because you saw it's a Metal Hero as well. How they did their villains. Yep. It was very one big centralized figure, villain generals under that. And there weren't a lot of standouts. Shadow Moon was technically a general at the beginning, and then he took over. Yeah. And then everybody else was killed.
And then everyone else died because of Shadow Moon.
But yeah, when it ends up coming to them, in all honesty, I don't recall a lot of them.
And there's probably a reason for that, and that's because
it all blends together.
It all blends together. That's Showa Toku in a nutshell. Depends on the season, surely. Yeah. There are exceptions, of course, but when it comes to the villain side of things, it's like we need an antagonistic force for our heroes to fight.
With God or Shocker or
Shocker, Foundation X,
and Heisei. Yeah, it was just a lot of the same, and still there was not a lot of differentiation, not a lot of standouts. It's mostly when we just end up getting to the Heisei that the standouts actually started happening.
What would you say is the first one that really stood out to you?
Kuga.
So the first Heisei one, okay.
There was no real centralized figure in that one. When Dagobah comes in, he's mostly just on his own for the beginning of that show. He's gone now.
Is it Dagobah or Zagabadeva?
Zagabadeva.
Are they two different people?
There was a lot of divas.
Okay. Sorry. Just checking.
Yeah, he's mostly just out there killing the other Grongi on his own.
Right.
They had, I can't remember, it was one of them, the lady, who was like always dressed up, and she was sort of like the centralized figure for a section of them, but not everybody was under her, because that show had a lot of different factions. The one who really sort of stood out in that one was actually the first monster that Kuga fought that we didn't beat, which was the Bat Monster. The Bat Grongi. But yeah, that's mostly the one that stands out the most for me when it ends up coming out. At least for those earlier Heisei Phase 1 ones. What about for you?
When I think about generals in Kamen Rider, what really sticks out to me would be something like the Neo Heisei era. Yeah. Because we would have like a collection of generals at the top as part of like a villainous like organization or faction.
Like Museum.
Museum is an example. I think the principal and his underlings from Forze, the Greed from O's.
Them in the movie.
We'll get to it. We will get to it. We watched the 10 Years After movie. We have thoughts for the O's 10 Years After movie. But back to my thoughts on this. Yep. We have a collection of generals, and then we have them creating the monsters, specifically the monsters or the minions, as it were. Yeah. And it's usually, sometimes they can be interesting, but generally the focus is much more on the hero. I gotta stop talking around you.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But usually,
there you go.
The focus is more on the hero.
Yeah.
As it tends to be in shows like this. So the villains are there. They are a threat. They need to be dealt with, but they never come to the forefront. they're always like working in the shadows.
At least for some
until the time comes for them to confront the villain, the hero head on, as it were.
Yeah, you end up having some of them like Lucky Clover from Fies, who were sort of like their own generalized villain group under the Smart Brain, and they all end up getting killed, but they more than less end up working as generals for that show in particular. Ryuki specifically did not have any.
Yeah.
Blade sort of didn't have any either. However, Hibiki did, for better and for worse, because they had like the man and the woman and the doji and the danshi. It came in later, and it's like they were all under those main two scientists, I guess, who everybody was made from. And they worked. I really like how they worked because they were threatening or terrifying. Or both. Or sometimes funny, but mostly the first two. They really worked for what the show was given. It's like, yes, we're going to go out here and create the monsters and have our different ways that we're doing it and how they have to be defeated and things like that. Who can be defeated by which instrument. It made it a lot more interesting to watch Hibiki that way. Dinner didn't have any.
It made up for it in other things.
It sort of did, but it had it at the very end, and it didn't work. Because you had Kai. Sorry, Kai.
I know he went from Kai to Guy later in his career.
Yep. Kiva did. You had the chess pieces. Rook and Bishop.
Yeah.
And King and Queen. And Castle. Nope.
No, that's a move. You mean Rook?
Rook, Bishop, King, Queen, Knight.
Knight.
That's the one I was looking for. Castle.
You tried.
You should have saw the 100-yard stare I had. I was just like, I'm going to say there's nothing that can stop me. I know it's wrong. But
Castle. My favorite piece in chess.
Just for some standouts, though. Some standouts. Some
stigmatisms.
It's sort of hard when they don't have a centralized structure.
In some ways, I think that can be a benefit.
Oh, yeah, it works for the show, but I'm talking about just like standouts, like trying to pick a specific general.
Yeah.
It's sort of hard when they don't have a specific structure that they follow.
I would say, I don't know if you would classify him as a general, but Dr. Maki from O's.
He was more the main big bad.
He became it eventually, but that's not how he started out.
No.
Because the way his character built up to becoming the last villain standing, I think is done really well.
Yeah.
I think like when we get it, especially when we start to get into like the trauma that he had with his sister when he was younger, and how that plays into his eventual turn to the dark side fully.
Nazca
from W.
And how he met his exceedingly tragic end, which was not deserved for him.
Because he switched sides.
Yeah.
Or at least he had planned to.
And then he died.
And then he got found out almost immediately, and he was killed off for his efforts.
He got killed off by terror.
Because Museum essentially, one of the reasons I like Museum is they essentially function like a mob family.
Yeah.
Because, W is a crime procedural, but in Toku form. And we have Museum, which is our mob family, and it's like you snitched on the family, so we got whacked.
He did.
And you were going to betray the family seat, so we got whacked. And that, because he was engaged or married to, who was it, Claydol?
No.
What was the other one? What was her form? Either way, but like the other daughter.
Yeah.
Of the leader of Museum, and I think that's a good example. Yeah,
who she became Red Nazca.
Yes.
What is her name? Sonozaki family. Taboo,
right?
Because they had two T's in
Saiko.
That. Yes. Yeah. That's a really good example, because I think all the generals, if you put Terror at the top, which I think you should, because he was the dad. Claydol, Psycho, Nazca. As much as I sort of don't like W because I don't really like the structure, I think the villains were exceedingly well done.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike somebody like, I don't know, Decade.
Anything in particular coming to your mind from Decade?
Honorary Decade.
Narutaki. Narutaki one of the worst examples of how to write a villain ever because
he's not really the main.
That's the thing. He's just kind of like a malevolent force throughout. Yeah. But they never tell you like what he wants.
They never told us what he
They never told us what his deal was. Ever.
And it bothers me to this day.
I'm sure there's fan fiction out there explaining it somewhere. Maybe Decade ate one of his pies when he was a kid, and now he's out for revenge. Who knows? Oh, no, it could be something as simple as that.
Yeah,
it could be something as simple as he cried, and that's it.
He cried a lot. That's it. But that's so stupid. He's so cool, but he's so dumb. I rewatched all the DBZA this week.
Oh dear.
But yeah, I feel like really enough, we have more bad examples that really stand out to me. The Time Jackers from ZO. The Time Jackers from ZO.
Oh god, so petty. So petty.
And not even like a good way.
No, what's her name? Pink from After 5. That's petty in the best way.
So she don't want to
That's
pay.
petty in the best way.
She don't want to pay, and I get that. But yes.
But then you have them who are, it's like, aha! You tripped! Would you like to not have tripped? Form a contract with me and become a monster.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we're going to use the pettiest reasons possible to get our way. And it just makes them come across as desperate.
And see, the desperate are really, really bland. Sort of like...
or dumb, or any number of synonyms and syllables.
The guy who played the second Zolder from Ryuki was in Kabuto. It's like sort of this secondary bad guy.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he wasn't great.
Oops.
That's once more of a thing of... Inoue wrote that second half of that show. And it shows.
I would say if I could switch back to a good example, I would say like the Greeds in general.
Yeah.
I think are a good example because we have, there are different dynamics within the four of them, or later 5, later 6. The way that they are able to play off each other in terms of what they want and in terms of how they're able to get what they want, or the means that they are willing to use each other, and the way... It creates some really interesting dynamics. One of my favorites, I think, is Gamel and Mizul.
Yeah. Because
Gamel is just wrapped around Mizul's finger. He is willing to do anything to please his beloved Mizul. You know, he's very childlike, but he's very destructive in the way he approaches things. And Mizul is, much more manipulative and conniving and is able to manipulate him to get what he wants.
Yeah.
And then you have Kazari and Uva, who are just like out for themselves, and it creates interesting dynamics among them all. I think
is, once again, just like I said in the Sentai one, I think the thing, at least for me, that really makes a good villain journal is the fact that they always have to have some ambition somewhere, which is sort of why I think I'm going to put Peridot here, because
Peridot's a great one.
Yeah,
that's a great one. Yeah,
he's not he's not the big bad, but he has something that he wants specifically from Emu.
Mm-hmm.
So especially because he is a part of Emu.
Yeah, he's the genius gamer half.
I just love the things they did with both of their characters. Really made them work off of each other, and that's one of those things where I said in a Sentai, it's just like, I want you to have something personal against the hero. Like, it doesn't even happen all the time, but having something personal really adds a layer, adds a dynamic to the actual show proper. What's another really good one? I'm trying to think of one in Heisei Phase 1.
Nothing that really jumps out to me. You mentioned Parado. I think that's one of the better examples.
Heisei Phase 1 was
how do you feel about
Rider versus Rider conflict?
Yes. Especially in Neo Heisei, early Reiwa.
Yeah. Even in Heisei Phase, like, you have Ryuki, like I said, they had no big bad in that.
There was Odin, but
he was sort of a
but even then, it was like, it was just the monsters.
Yeah, or the riders.
Mm-hmm.
Five sort of had that, especially with the man who unfortunately passed away, who played the Centaur. What was his name? Who became Kaisa?
Mm-hmm.
Yuji Kiba. He was more of a general who became the big bad at the end of it. The interpersonal relationships that he had with Takumi and the other people who were, his friends that he lived with. And how he went from good guy, more or less, to exceedingly bad guy and to snapping necks at the end of that show. It's still the thing I think of the most when I think of Fives.
It's the neck snap.
Yeah, they unfortunately undid it later on. It's NGO, and that hurt that a lot. It
happens.
Not happy with that. But yeah, he's one of those ones that I've been thinking a lot about, simply because of the misunderstandings and Fives. That definitely
the lack of communication.
Everybody had a phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that definitely did do something for the show proper, though. As much as we don't like Fives, it's just like you can't admit that at least the ideas that they had weren't interesting. Just could have been done a lot better.
You could say that about a lot of things, yes. Is there anything from Generals you would like to see in terms of Kamen Rider going forward? Because when it comes to Kamen Rider, I honestly... Because the dynamic of how a General works in Kamen Rider is inherently different from Sentai. In Sentai, it's usually we have, as we said, we have the big bad and the generals and then minions and monsters underneath. In this one, it's more like a team of generals that function as a collective big bad, is the way Kamen Rider tends to work. And maybe, do you think that's a dynamic that they should stick with, or would you like to see them switch it up?
I think it depends, because I would love to see, from what we have in rewrites right now, Olteka as general is you think where he was coming from at the beginning is not where he's ended up right now, where he's much more about causing really general chaos by killing a lot of people. Pretty much just all at once to get, Gifu back. But he's doing it because he wants to prove that he's better than everybody. And I really appreciate petty reasons like that. I'd like to see more pettiness. I love to see...
You want more pettiness, okay.
Yes.
The good kind of petty.
Yeah, just the good kind of petty. And, more interpersonal relationships, like what we have with...
Do you think petty is the right word, or...
A little bit of ambition, but, it's coming from a very
Can you give an example?
A very self-centered sort of ambition. I'm better than you. Here's 100,000 corpses why.
So just selfish, power hungry.
Sometimes.
Or just appetite for destruction.
Because on the other hand, you could end up getting a gremlin, and nobody wants that. Gremlin was awful. I hated Gremlin with the fiery passion of 1,000 burning hair clippers. Because he was a hairdresser.
Yes. Yeah, burnt hairs.
But yeah, that's mostly the thing that I want the most out of this. What about you?
Getting back to it really depends on the story, but a lot of the things that I said in the Sentai one is something I would like to see Generals do in Kamen Rider as well. But I guess I would like to see a little more... Because Kamen Rider has always been aimed at a little more of an older audience.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them be a little more malicious.
Agreed.
I would like to see our villains really push our heroes to the brink.
Just bouncing off of that. Yeah. Don't redeem them. Make them irredeemable. They do not need to be on the side of good at the end of this. No, sometimes people just need to be put down.
And here's how you do that. You give them the moment where they can redeem themselves, and they say nope.
Yeah.
That's how you do that. So I just lean into the toku genre and its inherent, melodramatic good versus evil nature that tends to go with it. Don't worry about making your villains super morally complex. I think it's... If there is a genre to lean into pure evil, it's toku.
Yeah.
So yeah, make your villains more malicious and more ruthless, and have them someone who can really challenge the hero at every turn.
Yeah, it's something that I'm really enough seeing in... Because it feels like really enough coming from Dawn Brothers. The way that it's even being presented, it seems to be more on the writer's side, where it seems like it's just like the age has been turned up a little bit. And I don't know why, but I'm sort of appreciating it on both sides, with both it and Revice right now. But yeah, let us know what you'd like to see from the villain generals in the future. What are your favorites? Who are your least favorites? Tell us in the comments below.
Please do.
Don't forget to join us all the things. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching.